Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for joining. I'm sure you're all very busy. You have Yom Kippur. We're here to honor the memory of Grandma Maisie, Esther Mלכה bas Avraham. We live in adverse times, but she was no stranger to adversity. She was from Liverpool, and when she was first married, even though my grandpa Eli was from Leeds, they actually settled in Liverpool. However, with a 6-month-old baby, that would be Auntie Abigail, Aleha Shalom, in 1939, the Nazis were bombing Liverpool, so they decided to relocate to Leeds, which is where my grandpa Eli was from. But my grandma, being my grandma, was not going to leave behind her family in Leeds, so she brought with her to Leeds. She wasn't going to leave behind in Liverpool her family, so she brought over to live with her in Leeds from Liverpool, her recently widowed mother, 2 younger brothers, and Uncle Abi. I'm not entirely sure how Uncle Abi got into this story, but Mum assured me earlier on in the day that it's complicated, so we'll get into that another time. However, some months after that, Leeds itself was bombed by the Nazis. So Grandma Maisie was once again on the move with her new baby, and this time was evacuated to a place called Paisley Bridge. Most of you won't have heard of Paisley Bridge. It's a small village in the North Yorkshire Dales. And unless you're an English cricket fan, you probably haven't even heard of North Yorkshire either, but it's all in Google. Grandma Maisie wasn't overly impressed with the food situation, and the final straw in Paisley Bridge was when the owner of the house where they were staying used Auntie Abigail's baby food dish to serve her dog its dinner. So she decided to move back to Leeds and take her chances with the bombers. Talking of food, this would appear to be a Massa family legacy. I recently did some research and found that 70% of the posts on the Massa family WhatsApp group are either pictures of food or discussion about food. Grandma Maisie's other legacies were a tremendous commitment to her family and Jewish values. You can see this today in the next generation of great grandchildren growing up, all doing good things. As in previous years, I'm going to unmute Rabbi Brovender. As in previous years, we're honoring her memory by learning Torah on the eve of our most holy day, Yom HaKippurim. And also, as in previous years, we are very grateful to have Rabbi Brovender with us to give the Shiur. I recently referred to Rabbi Brovender as my personal Torah educator since the day I made Aliyah. And for that, and being with us tonight, we are extremely grateful. Rabbi Brovender, Rosh Yeshiva of the Yeshiva, please give the share. I'm going to share the source sheet on my screen, and we'll follow along. And this way, you will know that I'm paying attention or not. Rabbi Brovender, over to you.
You put the first sheet up. Andrew, thank you. This Shiur Lilui Nishmat Esther Mלכה bat Avraham Aleha Shalom. I've done this, I don't know how many times, but I sort of feel I almost know and Grandma Maisie, but you know, I guess people can imagine different things. You know, I'm thinking about Yom HaKippurim. It's hard not to at this particular day of the year. And I'm thinking about where's the point? Where can I grab onto something that makes sense out of everything that's going on? So the first thing I want to remind you about is this pasuk in Achrei Mot. We read it in the Torah on Yom HaKippurim, and the pasuk kind of answers all the questions. Because the pasuk says, "Ki bayom hazeh yichaper aleichem, letaher etchem mikol chatotechem lefnei Hashem titharu." So there's yichaper, kapara, atonement, and then there's litaher, to purify. So those are the two words that should really concern us when we think about Yom HaKippurim, because those are the answers to the questions. Now, yichaper is generally taken to be a reference to punishment, that atonement means no punishment. So we are guilty, but by Yom Hazeh, on that day of Yom HaKippurim, yichaper aleichem. But not only lechaper aleichem, but letaher etchem, somehow to purify us. I mean, what could that possibly mean? What could possibly mean? I think that's what the Rambam is trying to tell us in the beginning of the second chapter of Hilchot Shuvah. The Rambam says you can actually change. You can be a different person. Letaher etchem. It means that on Yom HaKippurim, something can happen. And the something that could happen can make you into a different person. And being, what's a different person? Letaher etchem, to make you purer, to make you clearer. Because if you go back to the beginning, I mean, a person who transgressed, we're not talking about people who are out of the pale. We're talking about people like ourselves, people who keep the Torah and do the mitzvot as well as we possibly can, but sometimes we're just not so careful. Why aren't we careful? I mean, after all the mitzvot are in the Torah, and all the Torah comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu through Moshe Rabbeinu. So why aren't we careful? So I think that sometimes we think that maybe this is not such an important mitzvah. Or maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to forgive us anyway, so we don't have to do it. And what does the Taher Etchem mean? That we purify. I mean, do we get purified? Well, we recognize the fact that if God wants us to do it, it must really be important. And if it's really important, we're not going to get into this mess that we got into last time. So, Kiba Yom Hazeh Yichaper Alechem, you'll be atoned, you won't be punished. Letaher etchem mikol chatotechem, and you become different, you become special. And all of this is Kiba Yom Hazeh, on this day, on this particular day. Now we remember that there's an issue, we've spoken about it in the past, there's an issue about vidui, about confession. Somehow the Rambam in the first chapter, in the first halakha that he quotes, he says, Kishe Yashuv, like a person who is a Torah person, a person who's accepted the rule of Torah law. That person, it's not enough to do tshuva, to feel remorse, but you have to somehow confess. And so it doesn't say that in this pasuk, but the Rambam says you always have to confess. If you don't confess, nothing can get going. So on Yom Kippur, we confess a lot. We confess a lot. We say, where there's the vidui hakatzar, which goes ashamnu, bagadnu, gazalnu, dibarnu, dovi, and we like it so much, that vidui katzar, that we sing it. Imagine that. A person gets up and says, I'm guilty, and they say, just a minute, I'd like to sing it. I don't want to say it. I'm so happy that I have the opportunity to sing. It's a little bit strange, but that's what we do. That's what we say that. That's called the Viduya Katsar. And it goes through the alphabet. And if it goes through the alphabet, that means that it covers everything. A to Z. I mean, there's nothing missing. So, Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, Dibarnu, Dofi means anything that we might have done. I don't have to list it specifically. I don't have to tell you what it is that I did, but generally speaking, I'm becoming a yichaper person and a taher person, and that's good enough. That's good enough. So the vidui that we do is not exactly the vidui that the Rambam was talking about. The Rambam was talking about confessing a specific sin, but when we go to shul on Yom Kippurim, we just keep singing away, Hashem lo begad, and then there's the vidui ha'aroch, right, which goes, al chet shechatanu lefanecha, and then alphabet, ba'onis of ratzah. I didn't do that. Why would I confess to that? And all the things in the list are the things that I didn't do. I'm pretty sure. Okay, some things are speculative. Maybe I did that, maybe I didn't. But there are a couple of things on that list that I definitely didn't do. And it seems to me a little strange to be able to have to say all of those viduyim, all those viduyim which have nothing to do with me on Yom Kippurim, and somehow that fulfills the demand of Yichaper Aleichem, Metaher Etchem, on the day of Yom Kippurim. That's what makes Yom Kippurim so special. We don't do that on any other day. So in order to kind of clarify a little bit this whole process that we are kind of embarking upon, I wanted to do something that we did years ago, but not this particular part. I want to learn with you review with you the third chapter of Yonah, There we go. Terrific. So look, Yonah, we read all of Yonah in Mincha on Yom Kippurim. Mincha on Yom Kippurim usually comes after the break. It's kind of a little sad the way it's organized, that, in the morning I'm just waiting for the break. And after the break, I'm waiting for the piece of sponge cake that I'm going to get when Yom Kippur is over. And I lose out on Yonah. I lose out on Yonah because Yonah is really the clearest expression in the Torah, the clearest expression in the Tanakh of the act of tshuva. And so we should pay attention. We should pay close attention to Yonah because it has the answer to the mystery. Let's just look. So if I was learning that pasuk, I would say, that word shenit. Shenit means for a second time. Second time means that we are that HaKadosh Baruch Hu thought that Yonah was still okay. You remember the first two chapters of Yonah. The first chapter is that Yonah runs away. He doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to go to Nineveh. He doesn't want to tell them that they have to do tshuva. That's what Chazal said. The reason that he didn't want to tell them was because it would make Bnei Yisrael look bad. Okay, it could look bad. I mean, if they don't do tshuva, Bnei Yisrael, they look bad enough. But here in the pasuk it says El Yonah Shenit. Shenit means HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, look, I know, Yonah, that you did tshuva. You've changed. You can do now what you thought you couldn't do before. That's Shenit. That's in that little word, which means for a second time. God spoke again to Yonah. Yonah was still a prophet. He was still the emissary of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He was still, even though he refused the first time. Imagine that. But his refusal apparently was based on something important, something positive. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to him again, Pasuk Bet, Kum lechem Ninveh ha'ir ha'gdola. Kum lechem Ninveh. What's ha'ir ha'gdola? I mean, there's another Ninveh? There's a smaller city? No, I don't think so. Ha'ir ha'gdola means everybody's going to know about this. This is ha'ir ha'gdola. I mean, the communication in those days was not something to be terribly proud of. They didn't have telephones, they didn't have computers, they didn't have they didn't have phones. They didn't have what we have. Yeah, Gdolah though, yeah, Gdolah, a lot of people pass through, they come in, they go out. It's a stop on trade routes. Here Gdolah, here Gdolah. And Kra Eleha. Kra Eleha means call out to them. Right? You call out to people who can hear you. Who can hear you. So that's what the Kodesh Baruch Hu says. I want you to call out to those people because they can hear what you're going to say. Et hakri'ah asher anochi dover elecha. I want you to speak in the name of God to the people in Nineveh. Asher anochi dover elecha. Wow. And he goes, Pasuk Gimel, Vayakom Yonah, Vayelech el Nineveh kidvar Hashem. Here Yonah has changed. He's like a new person. In the first time around, he wouldn't go where God sent him. The second time around, Vayelech el Nineveh kidvar Hashem. He's following exactly the route that was set out by God for him. V'Nineveh hayta ir gedolah. Ha ha. Ir gedolah, and then it says in the pasuk Leilokim Malach Shaloshet Yamim. But here we have to understand. You have to understand just as Bnei Yisrael. If you look at the books in the Tanakh, Yoshua and Shoftim and Shmuel and Malachim, you look at those books in the Tanakh, you see that Bnei Yisrael seem to have the option of falling into Avodah Zarah, of becoming idolaters. They did it again and again and again. And we can't, in our world, it's a little hard for us to understand why. Why would they be so hung up on idolatry, which seems to us to be kind of silly and pointless? But the same thing was true in the opposite direction. The Ir Gedolah Elokim was that the Ninevites, the people from Nineveh, that is to say, they also looked around and they saw the Avodat Hashem, the service of God, as being positive. Ir Gedolah Elokim. They were servants of God, in spite of the fact that they were not part of the tradition of Sinai. But they saw something, they knew something. It's what it says in the Pasuk, Ir Gedolah Elokim. I mean, you could explain that it means God created the world, and God created a big city, and it's for God, but I want to explain it my way. Mahalach Shloshit Yamim, that's the reference to Gedolah. How big is it? 3 days. You have to go 3 days, right? Vayachel Yonah lavo ba'ir mahalach yom echad. And say Yonah came to the city of Nineveh, and he walked 1 day's walk into the city. Vayikra vayomar. I'm sorry. Vayikra. Nachamu vayikra. Right? Kum kra. Eleha. Vayikra, he did exactly what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him to do. Vayomar, od 40 yom Nineveh nehepachet. So, od 40 yom. 40 yom is a period of time that ultimately became associated with this period of time, right from Rosh Chodesh Elul until Yom HaKippurim. Rosh Chodesh Elul to Yom HaKippurim. 40 days. Well, not only are they 40 days, but they're 40 days where we felt the need, we, historically, like the we of history, felt the need to say slichot. What are slichot? Besides annoying, and you have to get up in the morning, besides that, slichot are more. They're just more of it. I mean, there's not enough. We know that there's never enough. Symbolically, we just say, I know I'm going to daven. I'm not going to daven like I do every day. But that's good. I know that my davening is not good enough, that my being is not good enough, the way I am is not good enough. So at least let me try to add on. Let me try. So that's the Arba'im Yom. Od Arba'im Yom. Oh, Arba'im Yom is a period of time which is associated with extra davening, extra slichot, extra. Od Arba'im Yom v'nidvei nehepachet. It's like saying to the people, it's not telling them this is going to happen in 40 days, but it's more like you have 40 days to determine the fate of Nineveh. You could change it around. You're going to change it around. After all, what's the point of the Navi? I mean, that's what people have to understand. The Navi yearns for his prophecy to be upended. He doesn't want the prophecy to come true. He wants people to do tshuva. You better do something in those 40 days. And so, Pasuk Hey, Vayaminu Anshe Ninvei Be'elokim Vayaminu. Vayaminu now, Emunah is not a Emunah, that's the word Vayaminu, Amen, Amen, Vayaminu. In fact, in truth, without a doubt, Vayaminu Anshe Ninvei Be'elokim. Of course, it's Ir Gdolah Le'Elohim, Ir Gdolah Le'Elokim. It is. It should happen. That's how they were. Now, tzom, this is not the tzom of Yom HaKippurim. Tzom vayibushu sakim. This was their natural reaction. They said, "Oh, something terrible is going to happen, so we better adopt the position of avelut, of mourning." They're fasting and they're wearing sackcloth. B'gedolam v'ad ktanam. That gedolam ad ktanam, there's a neutralization of distinctions. There are no longer great people, important people, old people, young people. Everybody is together. So vayikru'u tzom vayubashu sakim. Migdolam v'ad ktanam. They went into a state of mourning. How terrible is this going to be? How terrible is this all going to be? And then I get that from Yilbishu Sakim. You know that on Yom HaKippurim, we fast, but we don't mourn. It's not a fasting and mourning. It's not Tisha B'Av. It's not Tisha B'Av. It's a different kind of fasting. Not fasting because of something that happened on Yom HaKippurim. We're fasting because we want to clear our heads, because we want to be serious about what we're doing. We want to give ourselves the opportunity to think. In Nineveh, they didn't have the Torah, but they had mourning. Mourning. They had mourning. And so they mourned. They mourned their fate. Vayiga, Pasuk Vav, Vayiga davar el melech Ninveh, Vayiga hadavar el melech Ninveh. And it went up to the top, to the CEO of the company. I mean, the person who doesn't usually know what's going on with the people, so to speak. It's very rare that the person in charge, it's on the 40th floor of the building, knows what's going on the basement. But here it happened. Here it happened. Vayiga badavar el melech Ninveh. It kind of affected him. He couldn't help it. Vayakom mikiso. What do you mean mikiso? I mean, what makes a king into a king? His seat, where he sits, the throne. Now, in the olden days when I used to go to the movies, the king had a seat in the movie, and other people didn't sit in his seat, even if they were tired, even if the king was not there. You don't sit in the king's seat. Now, this may also be the halacha about kiburav. I want to get into that. Vayakom mikiso, vayaver adarto mi'alav. So the kisei makes him to a king. The aderet, the cloak he's wearing, makes him to a king. You know that the Ramban says in the Parsha of Tetzaveh about Bigdei Kahuna. Is that the Torah tells you how many bigadim, how many articles of clothing the Kohen is supposed to wear. It also tells you that it's made out, what it's made out of, but it doesn't tell you exactly how to do it. I mean, you know, you need somebody with that particular skill. So the Ramban says, you ought to do that. You ought to make Bigdei Kahuna. Go to the kings of Persia. The Ramban says they know how to do that. They know how to get dressed up. Go there. So he says, Vayigad davar pasuk vav, Vayigad davar melech ninvei, Vayako mikiso no kisei, Vayaveh adarto no aderet, me'alav Vayachasak, and he put on a sackcloth, Vayeshev al ha'efer, he's neutralized. There's no king. When you go and turn to the king of the world, it can't be any other king. You're not going to have a kind of a little king. So you see that, I mean, it's like we're just trying to glean what's going on. They are certain, they're convinced. The people of Nineveh and the king of Nineveh, they're all convinced that they should be in mourning. That mourning is the active ingredient in the tshuva that they're doing. Pasuk Zayin. Vayazek vayomer b'Ninveh mitam hamelech ugdolav lemor. And a call, a cry went out. And in Nineveh, they heard these words, mitam hamelech ugdolav, that came from the king and the great people who are no longer acting kingly or greatly. Lemor. Adam v'abehema habakar v'atzon al yit'amu me'uma. Adam v'abehema, man and animal. Bakar, the large animals, the tzon, the smaller animals, the sheep. Al yit'amu me'uma. Don't eat a thing. Al yir'u umayim al yishtu. Do not graze. Do not drink water. That reminds me a little more of Yom HaKippurim. But the Avelut, right? If you look back in Pasuk Hey, Vayaminu Anshe Ninveh Be'Elohim, Vayikre'u Tzom, Vayilbeshu Sakim, Migdolam V'Aktanan, they're mourning. And here the king and his great people send out a directive to the people and to the animals. To the animals. Okay, the animal part is a little hard to understand, but we know that Rav Kook in a famous pamphlet that he wrote about vegetarianism. The Rav Kook was more or less a vegetarian. Like on Shabbos, he ate a little bit of chicken because the halacha seemed to contradict his sensitivity. But the rest of the time, he didn't eat any meat, and he was confident. He was confident that the time would come when we would be able to recognize that while there's no comparison between the animals and man / woman, the animals also seem to have some kind of a soul, something in them which distinguishes them and makes them important. In any event, it's hard for me to say that the king in Nineveh knew the position of Rav Kook. I'm just quoting it in order to tell you that even in our tradition, there are certain sensitivities about animals that have to be clarified. But the king and his great supporters, they said, Ha'adam v'beima, ha'bakar v'atzon. It's like an emphasis. Man and animal, the large animals and the sheep, don't eat anything, fast. They should all be fasting. Al yir'u, they shouldn't graze. Umayim al yishtu. Pasuk chet. Vayitkasu sakim adam v'habehema. The men, and the women, and the animals all dress themselves in sackcloth. Vayikru'u el Elokim b'chazkan. They turn to God with great power. And when they turn to God again, I said they worship God. They weren't Jews. They were not included in the covenant, but they knew it's the Olam Haba. It's the next world. The next world is a world in which not everybody, at least according to the Rambam, not everybody becomes Jewish, but everybody knows God. It's just like a simple thing that everybody knows. Everybody knows God. They did it. They called out to God. I mean, again, they were godly. They believed in God. And then we finally have Yeshuvu Ish Midarko Ra'ah, from their unacceptable behavior, Umina Hamas, and the things that they stole with their hands. Mi Eldea Yashuv v'nicham Elokim v'shav v'yaropo v'lo noved. And so we have in this parak a general statement about tshuva. I mean, they did it. Vayashuvu, it says in the previous pasuk, Vayashuvu ish midarko ra'ah mirachamaz asher b'kapeihem. It's wonderful. Yonah shows up. He has a message. He's talking to people who know about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They know about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They're not part of the nation of Israel. They're not part of the covenants that we read about in the last parashiot of the Torah. Ki tavo, nitzavim, vayelech. They're all about the covenant. They're all about the covenant that was established between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Bnei Yisrael. And these people are not part of that covenant, but they are part of Ir Gedolah Le'Elokim. And so, what's his name? And Yonah, he becomes the student. He's learning something. And what he's learning is that we have the Torah. And the Torah gives us an edge on things. It teaches us something. It makes things clear that are perhaps not clear. Vayar, pasuk yud, vayar Elokim et maasehem ki shavo midarkam hara'ah. Vayar Elokim et maasehem ki shavo midarkam hara'ah. Again, it seems to me that this is not a statement about Yechaper Alechem, but it's Litaher Etchem. Vayar Elokim et Maasehem. What were the Maasehem? That they were unhappy, that they were mourning their fate. Ki shavu midarkam hara'ah. That's what tshuva is. It's not just remorse. It's not just feeling badly, but it's about grabbing yourself and saying you can change. You can remake the society you live in. You could start over again, have a new king, a new great people. Kishavu midarkam hara'ah. It was clear to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as the Rambam says in the beginning of the second chapter, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give witness to the fact, Tshuva Gemura, will give witness to the fact that every person will be able to, will change, will become litaher etchem. Vayinachem Elokim al hara'ah shediber lasot lahem velo asa. So you have this statement that tshuva, real tshuva, is the winning card. It makes everything else possible, in spite of the fact that we have done things that we should not have done, we should not have done. In spite of that fact, we think that we can be forgiven, but that forgiveness is dependent shavu midarkam hara'ah. It's always dependent on a change, on sincerity and on the change. And this is what we learn from Yonah. And this is why we read the book of Yonah, the short book of Yonah, on Yom HaKippurim at Mincha time. So I need the next page, Andrew. Okay, I would just remind you of a few statements that the Rambam said. The Rambam said, "Bizman hazeh." You see Gimel. This is Perek Aleph Halacha Gimel. Bizman hazeh she'ein Beit HaMikdash kayam, ve'ein lanu mizbeach kapara, ve'ein sham ela tshuva. Kein tshuva mechaperet al kol ha'averot. This is the Rambam. The Rambam says, something happened. The Churban Bayit Sheni, was destroyed by the Romans around the year 70 CE. I mean, look at the Chumash. The Chumash says you need the Beit HaMikdash. You need the Kohen Gadol going into the Beit HaMikdash. You need him going into the Kodesh Kodashim. You need saying Vidui. You need all of these things. It's all part of the day. It's all part of the day. So the Rambam says, Bizman hazeh, Halacha Gimel, Bizman hazeh she'ein Beit HaMikdash kayam ve'ein lanu mizbeach kapara, ein sham ela tshuva. I want to know, how does the Rambam know that? How does the Rambam know that? Ein sham ela tshuva. Bizman hazeh she'ein Beit HaMikdash kayam. There is no Beit HaMikdash. We can't do the things that the Torah tells us to do that are connected to tshuva. Ein lanu mizbeach kapara, ein sham ela tshuva. That's all we have left. And how does the Rambam know that? And he says, "Hatshuva mechaperet al kol ha'averot, al kol ha'averot." How does he know it? So I want to suggest that the Rambam knows it. The Rambam knows it from Yonah, from the book of Yonah. Because the people in the story of Nineveh, they did tshuva. And even though they didn't get it exactly right because they thought tshuva and mourning had something to do with each other, nevertheless, it's a clear raya. And that's the reason that Yonah was sent, to be able to allow the Rambam to write this halacha. Ein lanu mizbeach kapara, ein sham ela tshuva. There's only tshuva left, and a tshuva mechaperet al kol averot. We don't know what the averot were exactly that the people in Nineveh did. And then he goes on, Safir Rasha kol yamav asa tshuva b'achrona. Even a person who was a wicked person all of his days, asa tshuva b'achrona, and then just at the end of his life he did tshuva. And maskirin lo shum davar mirisho. You don't mention it. You don't say who he was and how he acted. שנאמר, רשעת הרשע לא ייכשל בו, ביום שובו מרשעו, ועצמו של יום הכיפורים מכפר לשבים, עצמו של יום הכיפורים מכפר לשבים, שנאמר כי ביום הזה יכפר עליכם. That's the pasuk that we started out this discussion with. So you see that the people in Nineveh who had a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and they realized that if they did tshuva, they would be forgiven. And that's what it says in Nineveh. And that's what the Rambam says. But he says, Bizman hazeh ein sham ela tshuva. Ki b'yom hazeh yichaper aleichem, v'taher etchem. But if Yom HaKippurim takes you beyond tshuva, takes you beyond what happens, right? And so the Rambam concludes another halacha. It says, Afal pisha tshuva mechaperet al hakol. Even though tshuva always works, mechaperet means pushes away the punishment. Mechaperet al hakol, atzmo shel Yom HaKippurim mechaper ve'atzmo. And the day itself somehow works. Yesh averot she'en mitkaprim lisha'atam, v'yesh averot. So there's a hierarchy of yeshivot, of averot that have to be dealt with. But the Rambam says, Afal pisha tshuva mechaperet al hakol. Tshuva always works. V'atzmo shel Yom HaKippurim always works. And we learned that if you accept the Torah, you have Atzmo Shel Yom HaKippurim as an added option, which like overwhelms the idea that the Ninevites had, which is you have to add mourning. According to the Rambam, you have to just add Yom HaKippurim. So I wish you all a Gvar Chasima Tova. And Yom HaKippurim should be like a day in which we can decide to do a little better. I think that's possible, I think, for myself, and I'm sure for everybody else who is here. All the best to you. Be well.
Thank you, Rabbi Brovender.
Should I leave?
Yes. You should have a Gemach Chasima Tova.
All the best.
Gemach Chatima Tova. Gemach Chatima Tova, Rabbi Brovender.
Gemach Chatima Tova.
Gemach Chatima Tova.
Gemach Chatima Tova.
Shakur, Gemach Chatima Tova.
Real to all.
Gemach Chatima Tova.
Gemach Chatima Tova.
One by one.
Yeah.
Okay, is het controle daar weer?
Picture of Jonathan? Is that a cat? Yeah, there you go. Yeah, they're moving. Yeah. So,
I'm going to stay on until I see the last two Andrews.
yeah.
I want to see the last two Andrews be there.
It's going to be
There we go. Okay, I'm shutting down. Thanks, everybody. Gemach Chatima Tova. Auntie Susan, have a long life.
Wish you a long life, Mom, Auntie Tim.
Oh, there's it, yeah. Long life.
Yeah.
Oh, so still there.
Oh, it's okay.
Auntie Cynthia, wishing you a long life and Gemach Chatima Tova.
Thank you. Have an easy fast, all of you.
Amen.
Tamara says, wishing you all a long life. Robert Bowden says, wish you all Gemach Chatima Tova and a long life. Thomas is uplifting. Jeffrey.
Bye, guys. Love you.
Bye, Soph. Speak tomorrow.
Get,
Can't wait to see you, Grandma, on Friday.
get packed up, Sol.
What?
Get packed up.
Yeah.
All
Bye.
right, looking forward.
Bye, Richard. Bye, everybody.
Shana Tova, wish you a long life.
Shana Tova.
Good to see you, Nancy
Thanks, you
Cynthia.
too.
Wish you a long life.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you. Are you outside?
Nope.
Oh, you're at the window. How are you all?
Well, good, thank you.
Good, good, good.
Fast well.
Bye, and you, and all of you.
Bye.
Bye, bye, bye.